In September 1994, young pupils attending an expensive private school in Zimbabwe claimed that they had witnessed a spacecraft landing just outside the school. They further claimed that alien creatures disembarked from the craft and advanced towards the children whilst communicating telepathically a message about environmental protection. Then they jumped back in their spacecraft and flew away again. Join us on Aliens Explored as we discuss the Ariel School UFO close encounter of the third kind.
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Welcome back, listeners, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look at UFO encounters, UAPs, cattle mutilations, alien abductions, the people behind it all, the people who investigate it, and all aspects that you can think of, and even a few that you might not wish to. I am one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
Hello,
how are you today?
Neil. I was about to say I'm good. I'm in a lot of pain and I'm exhausted. But other than that,
are you feeling cold? Because I couldn't help but notice you seem to be wearing a polo neck sweater.
Oh, not especially. No, I'm wearing this because I went out to my therapy session earlier and it's really bizarre. I dress up slightly for my therapy. It's like I don't like go suit and shirt and tie. I'm in jeans at the moment.
But you know, you're out, so you may make a bit more effort than if you're just going to be slobbing around at home. Yeah, I do that. I think most of us.
I do. I think it helps me to kind of in my own head sort of takes it that bit more seriously, that bit more formally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just mention it because I'm sat here in my, as you can see, my Aliens Explored t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and I'm sweltering here. So I noticed you wearing what appeared to be a winter attire. I thought, yeah, you experiencing very different weather than what we're experiencing here in South London.
It is really hot here at the moment in the UK. Yeah, now that summer's over, now summer's finished, we seem to be getting summer.
Yeah, it's often the way. That's my memory as a child as well. That, you know, in the run up to the school holidays in Britain, the school holidays are only 6 weeks, and they tend to run from the end of July to 2nd or 3rd of September. And running up to the school holidays, you will be going to school in just your shirt sleeves. You'll be, as a child, small child, you may be having lessons out more, spending more time outside, playing games outside, having lessons on the field and whatever, sitting under a tree for story time. And then first day of the summer holidays, you're indoors looking out at the rain. And then first day back at school in September, sweltering hot again. That's always been the pattern. I think that is the normal pattern, and we just don't. We're in denial about it.
Well,
because we think it's summer, it should be so hot.
It should be, definitely. Well, somewhere it does get very, very hot. Of course, is Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe in southern Africa. Yes.
How's that for a segue?
That's a great segue. Yes.
This is our subject for today. And indeed, so we're recording it. It's the 5th of September. When we're recording it, this was an incident that happened on the 16th of September. So in Rua, I believe it's pronounced.
Your guess is as good as mine. I've only ever seen it written down. Ruwa. I assume it's pronounced Rua.
Rua, yeah. So 16th of September 1994. So, what's that?
29 years ago.
29 years ago. Oh,
just
my
coming
goodness. When lots of children, 62, I believe, witnessed a UFO land. Saw figures come out. Spoke to them telepathically. Then buggered off again.
62 children at the school, but that's not all the children at the school.
Nope.
Now, Zimbabwe, where this happened, is a former British colony. It was named after Cecil Rhodes. It was Rhodesia. And it points out that most of these children are from wealthy white families in Harare, formerly Salisbury. So they're there as a kind of, I guess they're Africans, but they're white wealthy Africans of European origin. A legacy of colonialism, but an expensive private school.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know why that's relevant, but it seems the mention is made of it very early on in the story. That,
one thing I will say I find quite odd about that. So it is, you're absolutely right, it is a wealthy private school. The children were playing outside at break. All the teachers were inside having a meeting. You would have thought of these wealthy private schools in Africa, there would be at least one adult keeping an eye on the children for safety in 1994.
You would think, wouldn't you? I mean, Rua is described as it was only a local place name, little more than a crossroads in an agricultural region, but with an expensive private school situated there as well. I mean, maybe that's what's made it a town. I don't know how long the school has been there. And it was, according to the Wikipedia entry, I mean, for a couple of days prior to the incident at the school, there have been a number of UFO sightings across southern Africa. Reports of a bright fireball passing through the sky at night.
Yeah.
Some interpreted by some as a comet or a meteor. But there was a wave of UFO mania in Zimbabwe at the time. People calling into ZBC, I assume that's Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. They request
mania
call-ins.
Is quite an emotive term to use there, Neil.
It is it's the term used by Wikipedia. They said there was a wave of UFO mania in Zimbabwe at the time. So setting the scene for this alleged encounter with 62 pupils at this school, aged between 6 and 12. Now, they say
mania puts in mind that mental disturbances and things like that. That's a very emotive leading. I'm not saying you, but all right, Wikipedia.
All right.
But that's a very leading term to use.
Let's in more neutral terms. Interest in UFOs had been elevated prior to this incident by various sightings in the sky and radio show requesting, having call-ins about it.
That had been on the news, that had been talked about. It would have been at the forefront of everybody's minds. Absolutely.
Now, a guy called Brian Dunning claims that the fireball had been the re-entry of the Zenit 2 rocket from the Cosmos 2290 satellite launch. The booster broke up into burning streaks as it moved silently across the sky, giving an impressive light show to millions of Africans. It wouldn't have been silent, wouldn't it? You just wouldn't have been able to hear it because it's miles up in the sky.
Yeah. To be clear, for the listeners, the fireball described was what happened a couple of days prior to the Ariel School incident. It's not the same incident as such. Just a couple of days prior, and that guy might have been right, or he might not have been, or it might have been a meteor, or who knows.
He's noted as a UFO skeptic, so he's straight away found an explanation for something that could have been what they saw, but wasn't necessarily what they saw. I mean, you can never say, well, what you saw was this, or all you can say really is, well, there was something going on in the sky at the time that might have been what you saw.
Yeah. But the incident we're talking about specifically, so coming back to the 16th, you're absolutely right in that. I think it's important to sort of frame that setting of for a couple of days beforehand. There'd been lots of lights in the sky. People have been talking about this. But, these 62 children, so aged between 6 and 12. I think there were 80-odd children, or about 80 children out on break at the time, but only 62 of them confirmed seeing this. It took place over a period of about 15 minutes' time, where a silvery disc landed in a group of trees not far away. Some tall beings described with large eyes, and the kids drew pictures in the class as well of this silvery disc and these beings. Tall beings with large eyes. Sounds like greys to me, but
greys quite short. Aren't they little guys, about 3 foot tall?
There are some of them, yeah. They vary. There are different types of grey aliens. We ought to do an episode just on the different types of aliens that people have reported. That'd be quite interesting.
Now, 62 children said they saw this thing. If there's only 80 children in the school, you can imagine, well, 62 of them were actually in the playground, for instance, and saw this thing happening outside the school, and that the other 18 were somewhere else. They were
so
indoors.
It's about 15 of them that were on break with them who claimed not to have seen anything. But they were amongst the other 62. That's one of the curious aspects about this.
Well, I think the numbers aren't quite, because this report here, there were interviews carried out by a Harvard University professor, John Mack, the BBC's correspondent, Tim Leach, and who's the other one? Someone Mac. I'm just going to. Anyway, third person.
Got a note of that.
But they noted, it's been noted that dozens more children who were present stated they had not seen the UFO or anything unusual. So that kind of suggests, it doesn't specifically say, but it suggests that they were in the playground, they were just as capable of seeing anything coming down. But they're saying, well, no, we didn't see anything.
Oh, so, dozens. I might have just read it as dozen. A dozen.
No, it's a dozens more children. It doesn't say exactly how many. So that could be any number over 24.
And the stories from those 62 are somewhat inconsistent in that some say it was only one being that came out of the craft, and others say up to 4 came out. Here's I mean, it sounds like I'm doing your job for you here, being a skeptic and picking holes in the story.
You suggesting I'm not keeping up my end of the conversation.
No, not at all. But I think it's important to sort of look at this and factor it in. And for me, one of the things that this would have been, for some children, an incredibly traumatic and terrifying experience. And the mind has a powerful, especially in young children who are, their brains are still developing, the brains are still forming, the ability to basically blank out stuff you don't want to see. It's something we do, like, there's a monster in your room, you pull the cover over your head. That's not going to stop a monster. We know that. But it's kind of like, if you can't see it, it's like, I'm not looking. Like, that kind of, that if you can't see it, it can't hurt you mentality. It's a really strong driver. So that's what I'm ascribing those children who didn't see something to, or kids who saw different numbers of these creatures. But it doesn't just stop with them coming out and walking towards them. They started speaking to some of the children telepathically. They all talk about like just hearing them speaking in the brains, not through their ears. They'll describe telepathy, even though not all of them used those words. And it was all about, interestingly enough, environmental issues and, doing harm to the planet.
Yeah, you've got to do something.
Yeah, humanity's destroying the planet.
I know in a school playground, especially, I guess we're talking junior school or probably prep school for these children. Gaslighting is a big thing. That you get a couple of influential older pupils who make something up, and then they'll say to a younger kid, "What? You didn't see it?" And of course, the younger kid's going to go, "Oh yeah, I did see it, yeah." And they'll maintain that they saw something just because they've been, they don't want to get bullied or laughed at by the older kids.
Yeah, that kind of peer pressure, that's a very real, and I can't rule that out. But 62 children, that sounds like that's a lot for something like that.
I'm sure there have been other incidents relating to other things we've got on. Well, I'm thinking the thing that springs to mind is the Salem witch trials, where one person claims they've seen something and then another person latches onto it and they back the story up, even though they haven't actually seen anything, but they've heard enough of the story that they can fabricate evidence. Yeah, everyone wants to be in on it. Oh yeah, we saw this thing. Isn't it amazing? And kids like to tell a story. They like to, suddenly people are taking an interest in them and people are interviewing them. There has been some criticism. Brian Dunning, devoted an episode of his Skeptoid podcast to the incident. He criticised the interviewing techniques. He's saying that one of the interviewers, Hind, interviewed the children in groups of 4 to 6, with the other children allowed to listen to the stories as they're being cross-examined. So they've just heard what their friend said, so they just back it up. And some Mac only interviewed children 2 months after the alleged sighting. And Dunning says that Mac is a known environmentalist, so he could have prompted or suggested the telepathic communication angle about environmental protection.
Well, that doesn't make sense because they were talking about this before Mac interviewed them.
Were they?
Yes.
Is that what they said? Or was that...
They were talking about it in class. I mean, the teacher had them all draw pictures of what they saw and things like that, and talk about it. Yeah. It's recorded. It was...
Okay, what I mean here is that in Mac's interviews, Mac being... Sorry, I've got to... he's a Harvard University professor of psychiatry, John Mack. Visited the Ariel School to interview witnesses, and as Dunning has said, it was... Sorry, I've just lost my place. Mac only interviewed the children 2 months after the alleged sighting.
Well, you interview them when you get chance.
You interview them when you get a chance, but as it happened, it was 2 months after it, and that was when this message about the environmental protection, because it said so according to Mac's interviews, so 2 months after the event, the creature or creatures, according to which kids you spoke to, then telepathically communicated to the children an environmental message, and then they got back in their craft and flew away. So Dunning is saying this telepathic message aspect was not included in the other reports, only in Mac's. Hind reported it after the event.
I'm sure I've read differently, but I'm not going.
Okay, what
I'm not going to start ploughing through the entire of the internet while we're recording.
But what we've got is this idea that John Mack, a professor of psychiatry, visited the children 2 months after the event, and that was the first time. But then it might have been retrofitted to say, "Oh no, we were talking about this right from the start." But it seems, and he's a known environmentalist. I mean, it would have been very unprofessional to project his opinions into what these children had telepathically communicated to them.
It would.
Maybe he thought, the end justifies the means.
Like that, if you're going to lead children, and if you can lead them that specifically about, they talk telepathically for the number of beings that they saw would then be consistent because you'd be leading them about other details as well. So if they were being led, if the gaslighting, as you put it, was taking place, then the whole thing would be much more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interviewers,
be a unified story.
Yeah. There's a story about Hind. Hind visited the school on the 20th of September. She interviewed some of the children, asked them to draw. She was the one who asked them to draw pictures. The children were adamant that they hadn't seen a plane, but she noted that the different cultural background of the children, there didn't seem to be much diversity from what I read, that they were all white, wealthy Zimbabweans, imagine of British descent. I mean, maybe some of them were Afrikaner descent, they've come across the border. But Hind noted that the different background gave rise to different interpretations of what they'd seen. They did not all believe that they'd seen extraterrestrials. No. Some of the children thought that the little beings were something called tikaloshis, that are creatures of Shona and Ndebele, local folklore. Yes. Yeah. Well, that's it. You see something you don't understand, you don't recognise. You kind of reframe it to fit the narrative that is closest to that's not an uncommon thing. That's why we now talk about stories about people seeing fairies or goblins and things like that. We now look at them in a different light and say, well, could it have been extraterrestrials that they saw because of that very thing? They've seen something so extraordinary that their brain can't process it, so their brain has actually moulded it into something else, something that they do know about from their folklore. But of course, as we get older, as we grow up, we can look back at elements of our childhood and recontextualize them. We can understand things far better as adults. And of course, like I said, this was 29 years ago. These children that were, they're now 35 to 41 years old. They're adults. Most of them won't talk about it. Right. Most of them won't talk about the incident at all. Not even to say, it was just something we made up as kids and we had all the adults going. Nope, they won't do that. Some of them won't even tell their partners about this event. But one in particular, Emily Trim, she was part of a documentary, fairly recent, like last couple of years, on this, and she revisited the school, talking very clearly, very, I understand the mind's capability of reinterpreting information, but there was a book I read many years ago called The Perfect Victim. It was a true story, a horrifying true story, of a woman who was abducted as a young woman. I don't think she was a child, but certainly a young woman, and she was kept in a box underneath this couple's bed. They lived in trailer park style lifestyle,
And over the course of years, she was reprogrammed and retrained to kind of think that if she went out the door, all this guy, like the man in this relationship, he'd have people watching her and reporting back, and she eventually got rescued and reintegrated into society. But that deprogramming took an awful lot. So I know that people can be. We often program ourselves as well by telling ourselves the same story over and over again until it becomes truth. But still, the way Emily Trim talks, I don't know. It doesn't have that ring to it for me.
Do you remember the story of the photographs of the fairies that happened in about? Was it just after the First World War, wasn't it? In fact, it might have been during the First World War that these two girls borrowed a camera.
Yes.
In those days, one that took plates.
And a brownie, ironically.
Was it a brownie? And they came back with these photos of what looked like fairies that no one could disprove. And it was only, I think, when they were these girls were in their dotage, when they were old age pensioners.
They were in their 60s.
Yeah, that they finally admitted how they'd done the trick.
Yeah, and until then, they were just accepted as being totally true. And yeah, they were basically paper cutouts that they put on sticks
on a wire that was so thin it was invisible, which gave a sort of slight, so that people said, no, people would look at the photo and they said, well, no, I can tell that thing's actually moving. There's a slight blur around the edges in a clear photo. And of course, that was just it slightly moving in the wind. So children,
it's
we know
still
that children
debated to this day, though.
Still debated to this day, but it fooled people for a very. If it didn't fool people, there were people who, I guess there were people who believed it, and other people who didn't believe it but couldn't work out how it had been done. And if they cut these pictures of fairies out of books, they couldn't find books with bits cut out. They managed to hide all the evidence of their deceit, if you can call it a deceit. But a lot of people, they didn't believe it, but they couldn't work out how it was done.
I believe they claim to have drawn the pictures themselves.
Okay,
which would explain that. But no, there are people that will tell you that they were put under duress to claim it was faked.
I mean, and these girls weren't small children, were they? They were teenagers, sort of 16 or 17 years old, I think they were.
Well, I don't know if they were as old as that. I thought more 11, 12, but I might be wrong.
But old enough to draw properly and to use a camera, and these aren't. Yeah, I thought they were maybe 16 or something like that. I'd have to look it up.
Children back then weren't distracted by Facebook and Twitter.
but they did it for no other reason than just to play a trick, just to enjoy, telling a story and that seems outrageous and tricking people into believing it. You can imagine. I can quite easily imagine children of the age of these ones getting all in on this thing, and there would have been a few who said they didn't see anything, but they haven't got. There's no one there saying, actually, I was there, I was with them, and nothing happened. I didn't see anything at all. All they've got is a few kids who are saying, well, I didn't see. Their actual location is a bit in doubt. Cynthia Hind, by the way, is a local UFO researcher, or was, and she had
better to go and interview the kids.
Yeah, and she had recorded other alien sightings at the time, including a daylight sighting by a young boy and his mother, and a report of alien beings on a road by a trucker. So,
okay. Before we divert too far away from it, I just want to address that point about your analogy with the fairies. So there is a recognised psychological, not phenomena, pattern. There's even a name for it, and I forget what the name is. But it's the case of the more people that hold a secret,
Hmm.
the less likely it is that that secret's integrity is maintained. But it's like an exponential curve. It's not just well, you know, if like one person knows a secret, they'll keep the secret. Two people know it, you've twice the chance. No, it's like if two people know it, all right, it might be twice the chance. If three people know it, it's like it becomes 5 times the chance. If 4 people know it, it's like 20 times. You know, it's a really steep curve. So for 62 children to keep the secret for 29 years, that's almost a statistical impossibility. It will have crossed that threshold, that event horizon of being able to keep a secret.
But have they all kept a secret? That's the thing. Have some of them spoken out, but there's just been no interest.
None of them have come forward and said, yes, we made it up.
Not publicly anyway, or not. It's not been reported. I mean, I know there have been more reports of
to qualify, just in case any of our listeners are thinking, hang on, what about like government secrets? No, we're talking about secrets without consequence. So, like, you know, if you sign the Official Secrets Act, that's very different because there are real consequences to you talking about it. I'm talking about consequence-free secrets.
But I can also imagine some of the pupils there, especially some of the older ones who didn't see anything, when they were told about the story, they would have persuaded some of these younger kids, isn't it? You didn't see anything. I don't believe you. Admit it, or I'll take your lunch money and give you a wedgie. Okay, I admit it. I never saw.
That wouldn't hold the sway 29 years later that it did then.
No. I mean, it has been revisited in 2016. Witness Emily Trim exhibited paintings.
I mentioned her earlier.
Yeah. So 2016, and in June 2021, Barstool sports writer Czar spoke in an interview about being a pupil that day, and he saw the bright light come down from the sky and the aliens come out. There was a 2020 documentary called The Phenomenon, in which other witnesses have spoken about how the experience has affected them. So, yeah, maybe they were persuaded that what they really saw really was real.
Is that as we reach the end of this week's podcast? Is that the fence you're sitting on? Is they were persuaded?
They were persuaded. Yeah, I'm sitting on the fence. I'm very sceptical of the story that they actually, a UFO came down, alien beings came out to these small children at school and passed them an environmental message. I mean, I suppose, aliens from a different galaxy might not know they wouldn't know what human beings were like, and they wouldn't realise they were talking to small children with undeveloped brains. Maybe. But no, I don't think so. I'm going with the kind of mass hysteria that can occur in a school playground. I don't know why it hasn't since been recanted, but yeah.
So for my part, I can see the possibility of the story getting embellished or conflated, but I'm absolutely convinced there is the grain, the nugget of truth in this story, that these 62 children, probably more, but others too scared to admit it perhaps to themselves even, but they saw something, a phenomenon really bizarre. Yeah, I'm certain they saw a craft land and these strange beings get out. Beyond that, yeah, like I say, I can see the possibility for misremembering, embellishment, things like that. But no, I'm certain something happened. But what do you think, listeners? We always like to know what you think about these stories. Is the Ariel School incident An really important case in ufology, or is it, as Neil thinks, just a case of a load of kids making stuff up? You can let us know what you think via the usual means. You can email us, aliensexplored@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching Aliens Explored, or you can put a comment in one of our YouTube channel videos. Or if you are one of our Patreon subscribers, then you get exclusive access to our Discord server where you can communicate with us that way and, of course, talk to other like-minded people as well. All it costs is just £2 a month, and yeah, you get access to that and you get our appreciation as well. Join us next time, though, when, oh, yes, exciting one for you, Neil. We're going to talk about a debunker. Philip J. Class.
Looking forward to that one.
Miss that one.
No.
Absolutely. In the meantime, everyone, keep watching out for these strange craft landing just outside the school. Don't keep an eye on schools, though. That would just be wrong on so many levels. But do keep watching the skies. Just make sure you turn up to pick the kids up all the time.